world around you feels distant, like a memory seen through a fog. The air is heavy, thick with an energy you can't quite place. You float above the dirt path that winds through the village, neither here nor there, not bound by time or space. You are more of a witness to something unfolding, something dark and inevitable. The crowd gathers ahead, their faces blurred and indistinct, as if you were looking through water. They are waiting, eager yet grim, for what is to come. From your place above them, you see everything, but they cannot see you. You are not of their world, but somehow you are drawn into this moment, this dark chapter of history. Below you, the figure appears, a lone soul, led by guards up the hill. Their steps are slow, hesitant, and their hands bound in chains. You drift closer as if pulled by the force of the scene, and for a moment you almost feel their fear, their confusion. They glance upward, eyes wide, searching for something, perhaps salvation, perhaps understanding, but they find nothing but the cold sky above. You follow as they're led up Gallows Hill, the crude structure ahead growing larger with each step. It stands stark against the gray horizon, a symbol of finality, but you, as you observe from this otherworldly place, feel an unease, a tug in your mind. Why have you been brought here? What unseen force could be driving this madness? You feel no sense of guilt or sin around the accused, only an overwhelming sense of dread, as though this is a terrible mistake. You know the answer lingers in the whispers of the crowd. Their voices reach your ears like echoes, faint and distorted. Accusations of witchcraft, unnatural behavior, dark pacts, but you sense more. Jealousy, greed, resentment. The way they cast their eyes on the land the accused once owned, or how they murmur about some old argument, a slight from years past. You drift further past the crowd, past the executioners, past the gallows themselves, now hovering at the edge of it all. The wind carries fragments of prayer, of hope, and of betrayal. The accused ascends the platform, their breath shallow and quick. Their back is straight, their face set in determination, though you sense their terror beneath the surface. They know what's coming, and so do you. Your mind races with questions. Why? Why them? Why now? The accusations feel false, hollow as though conjured not from a place of truth, but from fear and convenience. You've seen this pattern before, in other places, other times. A scapegoat to rid the community of its collective guilt. The executioner steps forward, slightly methodical. The crowd falls quiet, their frenzy fading into the weight of this moment. You feel the heaviness of time itself passing down on you, as though this moment will echo long after these people are gone. The noose is placed around their neck, rough and frayed. The wood creaks under the tension. And yet, just as the final moment approaches, the world begins to blur once more. The edges of reality curling like parchment in fire. You drift further away, the figure of the gallows fading into the shadows. The last sound you hear is the tightening of the rope, a sharp, cold snap. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to the channel. What we do here is I write you a short story, and then I write a script based around that short story. The subject today, if you haven't figured it out from the story, is the Salem Witch Trials. I wanted to do this one for a while. It just kind of took me a while to figure out what I wanted to do with the story. I really had difficulty with this one, trying to figure out how I wanted to handle it. So I appreciate you guys so much for coming by, watching the videos. I hope you guys like this one. History of the Salem Witch Trials. The Salem Witch Trials are etched into history as a horrifying and cautionary tale of mass hysteria, superstition, and the dangers of unchecked authority. Between 1692 and 1693, in the Puritan settlement of Salem, Massachusetts, 200 people were accused of witchcraft, and 20 lost their lives in one of the most infamous witch hunts in history. The panic that overtook Salem was swift and brutal, and its effect rippled through the town for generations. The beginning of the panic. The witch trials were born from a mysterious illness in January 1692. It began with two girls, 9-year-old Betty Paris and her cousin, 11-year-old Abigail Williams, both of whom lived in the home of the local minister, Reverend Samuel Paris. These girls began exhibiting strange behaviors, convulsing, shouting, contorting their bodies in unnatural ways. They claimed to feel invisible forces pinching and pricking them. In a deeply religious and superstitious society, the Puritans believed in the real presence of the devil, who could act through his human agents, witches. After consulting a local doctor who could find no physical cause, the community was convinced that the girls had been bewitched. The fear spread rapidly. Soon, more young women, including Ann Putnam Jr. and Mercy Lewis, began exhibiting similar symptoms. The unexplained fits and convulsions triggered an avalanche of fear. The question quickly turned into who might be responsible. The girls who were pressed to identify the witches tormenting them, and the three women quickly emerged as the first suspects. Tituba, a slave in the Paris household who hailed from the Caribbean, Sarah Good, a homeless beggar known for her foul temper, and Sarah Osborne, an elder who had been estranged from the church. All three women stood out from Salem's strict Puritan community in different ways, and this made them easy targets for accusation. In a startling and strange turn of events, Tituba confesses to witchcraft, perhaps under coercion or threat, claiming that the devil had come to her and forced her to sign his book. She named other witches in her confession, opening the floodgates to accusations. Yeah, the theory is with her is that, it's the same thing with pretty much all of them, is that they were all tortured and kind of forced to confess. And the same thing happened with the Knights Templar when the French king went after them. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Knights Templar. I like to think that most people are. But the Knights Templar were, they were knights for the church. They defended the trade routes to Jerusalem through the Middle East. They were incredibly rich. Like these dudes founded the first banks. But long story short, they ended up being tortured and then, confessing to all sorts of heinous acts just because the French king wanted their money and land. It's incredibly tragic for all those involved, and the French king ended up taking all of their money. He ended up locking up the Pope for a time, and it's just incredibly tragic, everything that happened. But anyways, Tituba confessing is to me rings kind of the same vein. Like, she was just tortured and forced to confess, and that the torture wouldn't have stopped until she confessed, and she was probably tortured afterwards too. We don't know is the big problem here. There's so much that happened here that a lot of it we just don't know. The expanding web of accusations. Once the witchcraft accusations began, they spiraled out of control. The people of Salem, already a community divided by personal rivalries and religious zeal, found themselves swept up in the frenzy of accusations. No one was safe from suspicion. Prominent figures in town, such as Rebecca Nurse, a 71-year-old grandmother and deeply respected member of the community, found themselves accused. Nurse's case shocked many. If someone like her could be accused, who was safe? Another shocking case was that of Bridget Bishop, an outspoken tavern owner. Bishop had been accused of witchcraft in the past and was an easy target because of her open disregard for Puritan norms. She was the first to be tried and executed in June 1692, setting a chilling precedent. Giles Corey, an 81-year-old farmer, also fell victim to this hysteria, accused alongside his wife, Martha Corey. He refused to enter a plea of guilty or not guilty. As punishment, he was subjected to a gruesome process of pressing. Heavy stones were placed on his chest to force the confession. Corey, stubborn and defiant, refused to confess and died under the crushing weight of the stones. His last words were said to be, "More weight." Dude's an absolute legend. Absolutely. That is a hard-ass move right there. As the summer wore on, more and more were dragged into court. The trials were often based on dubious evidence, such as spectral evidence. This was testimony from witnesses who claimed to have seen a spirit or specter of the accused committing acts of witchcraft, even when the accused were elsewhere. The court accepted these visions as valid evidence of guilt. The practice made defending oneself nearly impossible. Yeah, so in the Salem Witch Trials, it was thought that your body could be off doing whatever, and that your spirit would go and commit all of these kind of evil acts, which, you know, in our modern day eyes makes zero sense whatsoever. You know, being a hysterical time in a, you know, puritanical village, it unfortunately happened. There's not a whole lot that these people could do to defend themselves. Even if they tried to defend themselves, they probably would have been, you know, tortured until they gave up information they didn't actually have. So the whole thing, the whole Salem Witch Trial is just, it's an unfortunate turn of events that started with 2 little girls. Absolutely wild. Despite the absurdity of the accusations and evidence, the accused face a grim choice: confess to being a witch and potentially save your life, or maintain your innocence and risk execution. Several of those who were accused, in a desperate bid to avoid the gallows, falsely confessed to witchcraft, feeding the cycle of hysteria. The trials and executions. In total, 19 people were hanged, and 5 others died in prison waiting for their fates. Gallows were located on what is now known as Gallows Hill, where the convicted witches met their end. One of the most tragic figures of the trials was John Proctor, a local farmer who had initially spoken out against the trials, calling them a farce. His outspokenness earned him and his wife Elizabeth accusations of witchcraft. Despite their pleas, John was sentenced to hang, while Elizabeth, who was pregnant, had her execution delayed. The trials were overseen by Judge Samuel Sewell, Chief Justice William Staunton, and others who had carried out the law of the Puritan Church. Governor William Phipps appointed the court of oyer and terminer, specifically to handle the witchcraft cases. The court was known for its harshness and its reliance on spectral evidence. The judges, zealously devoted to eradicating witchcraft, took the word of the afflicted at face value, and the accused often had little to no representation in court and were presumed guilty from the moment they stood trial. Theories behind the Salem Witch Trials. The reason behind the Salem Witch Trials have been subject to debate for centuries. Several factors likely contributed to the events that unfolded. Ergot poisoning. One of the most intriguing theories suggests that the bizarre symptoms displayed by the girls and other afflicted individuals might have been caused by ergot poisoning. Ergot, a fungus that can grow on rye and other grains, contained a chemical similar to LSD, which can cause hallucinogens, muscle spasms, convulsions. In the damp, swampy conditions of 17th century Salem, ergot could have easily contaminated the local grain supply, leading to strange physical symptoms. Though the theory is controversial, it offers a potential explanation for the sudden onset of convulsions and bizarre behavior. Social and economic rivalries. Salem Village was a community divided. There were bitter rivalries over the land, religious differences, and economic status. Many of the accused were individuals who stood in opposition to the powerful Putnam family, who were key players in driving the witchcraft hysteria. Land disputes were common, and the accusations of witchcraft may have been a way for some families to eliminate rivals and seize their property. Rebecca Nurse, for example, had long been involved in the land disputes with the Putnams before she was accused. It wasn't just fear for the supernatural at play. There were tangible benefits to accusing one's enemies of witchcraft. Religious zeal and Puritanism. Salem was a deeply religious Puritan society, and the Puritans believed they were constantly at war with the forces of darkness. The devil was seen as an active presence in the world, trying to corrupt souls and undermine their godly mission. This religious fervor created the perfect environment for the witch trials. Many believed that the devils were actively working through witches to harm the community. The strict puritanical beliefs amplified the paranoia, leading people to see evil where none existed. Gender and misogyny. Of the 200 people accused of witchcraft, the vast majority were women. The Puritan Society of Salem had rigid views on the roles of women, and those who didn't conform, whether because they were unmarried, outspoken, or otherwise deviated from the norm, were often viewed with suspicion. Women who did not fit the mold of a submissive, quiet, God-fearing wife and mother were targets in a society where the woman's role was closely tied to her virtue and adherence to religious teachings. The end of the trials. By the fall of 1692, doubts about the legitimacy of the trials began to surface. Prominent ministers, including Increase Mather, began to speak out against the use of the spectral evidence, arguing that it was unreliable and dangerous. Government Phipps, whose wife had been accused of witchcraft, finally stepped in to halt the trials in October of that year. He dissolved the Court of Warrior and Terminer and replaced it with a new court that disallowed spectral evidence. The new court brought an end to the executions, and by May 1693, Governor Phipps had pardoned many of those who were still imprisoned. In the years that followed, many of the key figures in the trials expressed regret. Judge Samuel Sewell publicly apologized for his role in the tragedy, and the state of Massachusetts later passed a bill restoring the good names of those who had been convicted. Financial restitution was offered to their families, though no amount of money could ever undo the damage. Conclusion. The Salem Witch Trials remain one of the most tragic examples of what can happen when fear, superstition, and mistrust are allowed to overtake reason and justice. In the span of a few short months, 20 innocent people lost their lives, and countless others were imprisoned, tortured, and forever scarred. The pain inflicted by this dark chapter in history extends far beyond the victims themselves. Families were torn apart, communities shattered, and trust eroded. As we reflect on these events today, our hearts go out to those falsely accused, tortured, imprisoned, and executed during this horrible time. Whether it was ergot poisoning, greed, religious zeal, or personal vendettas, the Salem Witch Trials are a powerful reminder of the dangers of mass hysteria and the consequences of unchecked authority. They teach us the importance of due process, the need for critical thinking, and the necessity of compassion in the face of fear. The echoes of Salem resonate through time, urging us to question and reflect our own beliefs and actions. If you found this exploration into the Salem Witch Trials enlightening, don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Personally, I do believe that ergot poisoning and greed were the main factors. It's unfortunate what had happened to all these people, and ever since I was a kid and first heard about this, it broke my heart. As I'm sure most of you have some sort of feeling about this. It's unfortunate, and I wish the spirits of those people rest. But that's gonna do it for today, guys. Hope you like this episode. See you next time.